Mr. Speaker.
I call the honourable member Stuart Nash.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. We are debating title and commencement of this bill, Taxation Annual Rates Budget and Measures Bill. One thing I would like to have a look at is commencement and talk a little bit about this, Mr. Chair. Of course, Mr. Key has said that he wouldn't change KiwiSaver. That was one of the platforms that he campaigned on in 2008. He also said he wouldn't increase GST, of course, which he did. At least with this one, he said he is going out to the public to seek a mandate. He's made that absolutely clear, but he has put on the table what his plan for growth is. Mr. Key has said that his plan for growth includes cutting KiwiSaver. And I suppose the thing that annoys me about that a little bit, well, actually a lot, Mr. Chair, is there's 1.7 million people in KiwiSaver, and the reason they are investing in KiwiSaver, the reason they have invested in KiwiSaver, is because we suggested they did. We told New Zealanders, when I say we, I'm talking about Parliament, I'm talking about members of Parliament, I'm talking about Michael Cullen, I'm talking about actually members of the National Government and the Honourable Minister himself, went out and told New Zealanders they needed to save more, that this country was in trouble, because we've got huge net debt. What we've done is we've pumped a whole lot of money into housing, into the non-productive sector. So what we need to do is we need to save more. That superannuation, you know, we don't know what's going to happen in all this time. So if you really want to make sure that you can retire with dignity, then you can live with respect in your older years, you need to put some money away for a rainy day. You need to put some money away for your retirement. And so this is what we told New Zealanders, this is what we advised them. We set up the scheme that would allow this to happen. It was quite generous. You know, if you invested, we gave a carrot of $1,000, which is not an insignificant amount of money. And most New Zealanders realised that this was a good deal, but we figured that most New Zealanders needed a little bit of a sweetener, so we gave them $1,000. There were some nice incentives there, and they took this up. They saw it because New Zealanders, by and large, I think, are pretty well-engaged people. They're intelligent. They know a good deal when they see it, but they also know that their future is important. So 1.7 million New Zealanders invested in KiwiSaver. And this is the thing that's really disappointing. With this bill that we're debating now, in urgency, have taken away part of the incentive to invest in KiwiSaver. And I can't understand the rationale behind that, because New Zealanders are doing what we told them to do, which was save. And then we're taking away some of the incentive. In fact, there was a bloke on the, I think he was on the television this morning, an ex-All Black, who felt so aggrieved about this. He said he was an ex-National voter. He voted National in 2008, but he felt that John Key and the National Government had broken a contract that he had signed with voters. So there are a lot of New Zealanders out there who actually get this. It was a pretty simple message. Stop investing in houses. Stop this spending on plasma TVs and all this consumables, because that, of course, drove up international debt. It increased interest rates, and it just wasn't good for our economy. It's one of the reasons why we are so indebted. I mean, the Labour Party, we recognise the fact that we have issues around debt. We know that the government, that any government just simply can't keep borrowing $380 million a week. We accept that. But I'll tell you, this is not a plan. This piece of legislation does not set out a plan for how to address that. And if a plan is cutting KiwiSaver, then God help me. Because this is not a positive move to drive economic growth. It's a negative move. This is not a positive way forward for this country. It's actually taking us backwards. Because one of the things that we recognise, one of the points that we said was so important about driving economic growth in New Zealand was the depth in our capital markets. Now, KiwiSaver was beginning to achieve that. Now, let me give you an example. I think KiwiSaver, what we need, Mr. Chair, what we absolutely need, and I thought the Prime Minister got this, and I thought the Minister of Finance got this. We need a pool of money that can be invested in New Zealand on behalf of New Zealanders to grow the pie. I think there was someone else talking before about the scheme that was put in under Norman Kirk. Now, that was put in by Sir Roger Douglas. I mean, Sir Roger Douglas understands the need to save. And that, it doesn't come more right-wing in this Parliament than Sir Roger Douglas. It did, of course. Don Brash sits here every now and again. But Roger Douglas understood the need to save. Even Sir Roger put in a scheme which goodness me, if it had been still going now, our economy would be completely different than it is. But that was axed by National. And Mr Chair,
I call the honourable member Stuart Nash.
Thank you very much, Mr Chair. And I look at the state of our economy at the moment, $16 billion worth of debt, and I can only help but wonder what it would have been like what it would look like if 40 years worth of savings had accrued. As sure as eggs, Mr Chair, we would not be facing a $16 billion deficit. But I'll tell you another thing. Mr Key laid it out. He said, OK, we will see you on the campaign trail. So he put it down. This is a mandate. This is a mandate about asset sales, and it's a mandate about KiwiSaver. This election will be a mandate about this bill. So this is quite an important piece of legislation. It's a small piece of legislation. It's a very important piece of legislation, Mr Chair. The fact that it is actually being rushed through under urgency makes no sense to me, because there's still enough time to take this through before the election. Again, like I said, you have to look at the, not you, Mr Chair. All we have to do is look at the commencement date. There is no urgency with this. But the consequences are huge for all New Zealanders. Perhaps we could have called it Taxation Stealing Kiwis Dream Bill. Because in a way, Mr Chair, that's what's happening. Because they're taking away the dreams that actually members of Parliament handed out to people. Because we painted a vision to all New Zealanders that if they invested in KiwiSaver, there would be a nest egg there for them. Well, in a way, we're taking that away. And I admit we're not taking all of that away, but let's be honest here. If you take away $10 a week, or if you put in an extra $10 a week, 52 weeks for the next 20, 30 years, that adds up to a significant amount of money. A significant amount of money. And so to take it away is in a way taking away the dream, stealing a little bit of that dream that New Zealanders thought that we had laid out for them. And that's why I come back to this fact, who said that the bloke in Eltham, the government had broken a contract with him. I'd also like to remark on the words that Mary Holmes said. Now, Mary I very much doubt she's a Labour supporter. She might be. She's certainly sensible. She understands economics and finance. And she said, what has happened is you've taken an excellent scheme and only made it very good. So this scheme's gone backwards. In fact, I think the vast majority of political commentators who understand the woe that this economy is in has said, this is actually a step backwards. It's not a step forwards. It's not a plan for growing this economy. This legislation is not a plan. But when Mr Key said to Phil Goff, he said, I will see you on the hustings, Mr Goff. Well, I can't wait for that. I can't wait to stand in a public meeting with Mr Tremaine in Napier as he explains to the people of Napier why this is good, why it was necessary to take $10 off the people of Napier. I'm also keen to hear Mr Tremaine explain at a public meeting why the government has taken $120 million out of the Hawke's Bay economy in terms of working for families. Because this is what this bill does, Mr Chair. It takes $120 million. We've got to remember that working for families didn't go to the wealthy. It went to the people who had been identified as needing a little bit of a hand up. Not a handout, a little bit of a hand up. Who worked, but who had children. And you've taken away a portion of that out of the Hawke's Bay economy. And that is going to hurt one of the most depressed regions. I mean, Napier, I argue, and I'll argue with my colleagues on this, Napier is the best city and the best country in the world. But this just steals a little bit out of this. This just steals a little bit out of this because the people in Napier are going to lose some money. There are more shops closed in Napier now than there have been for 10 years. And this bill takes money out of the Napier economy because it gave money to people who would spend money. That's one of the reasons why the Labor government instigated working for families, because it realised that people who were working, people who were bringing up children, needed a little bit of a hand up so they could continue to live a decent lifestyle that we demand of all New Zealanders. This is why I'm so disappointed with this legislation. And this is why it's such a shame, it is such a shame that in fact it couldn't have gone to Select Committee. I'm on the Finance and Expenditure Select Committee, Mr Foss is the chair. We could have heard all the arguments for and against this and made a reasoned, rational decision and then presented it back to the House. But I suspect, Mr Chair, the reason why it hasn't gone to Select Committee and why we are passing it under urgency is the government knows the response. The government knows that every single Kiwi would say no. Every single of the 1.7 New Zealanders that have invested savings would say no.